Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Wiswall. I'm from Cate Farm in central Vermont. This is the workshop for farming smarter, not harder. A little bit about myself. I've been growing organic produce for the last 38 years full-time at Cate Farm with my wife. It's a 148-acre farm with 22 acres in cultivatable land. We have 8 96-foot-long greenhouses where we grow some seedlings and some in-the-ground tomatoes and greens. Of the 22 acres in fields, we used to grow everything all the time on 12 to 16 acres. Now it's gotten a lot smaller. As my wife and I have gotten older, we don't want to work as hard. But a lot of it's in forage crop right now, traded with a organic dairy that's our neighbor, and so then we can rotate within a nice organically fertilized hayfield. So, before we used to grow, when we used to grow a lot of row crops, we had 5 full-time employees seasonally. We had a thriving CSA during the 90s for about 6 years. I personally went to farmers market for 25 years. We stopped about 5 years ago. We're longtime members of Deep Root Co-op, which is a growers co-op of $2.5 million in sales that sells into the Boston and New York markets to places like Whole Foods. And I guess that's about it. And we also sell wholesale around central Vermont. I also want to point out that I started out on a kind of a non-traditional model. I bought into a partnership that bought Cate Farm. I owned 5% of that partnership, and then I rented the farm from the partnership for an annual payment, so then I could start my own produce company, my own produce business. And in 12 years, I built up my business. I got accounts. I learned what I was doing, and built up my business enough so then after 12 years, I could go to the bank, and I borrowed $190,000 from the bank to buy out the other partners. And so it's now just me and my wife on the title. But it was at that point there that I had to do some serious number crunching to actually convince the bankers, but more importantly, convince myself that I could pay it back, because that was, my neck was on the chopping block with a hatchet wavering over it, and I couldn't screw up. So I had to make sure I was going to know that I'd be able to pay it off. And besides farming, I also give talks like this to try to help people with the business end of their farm, because it's often a spot that isn't addressed many other places and is a very important part of your farm. And when I do these talks, I see the same questions coming over and over again. So I wrote a book. It's called The Organic Farmer's Business Handbook. And I'm going to pass out a couple of copies here. And if you're going to end up in the back, just at the end, I'll pick them up. I'm not here to sell books. I am here to help farmers become more profitable and less stressed out. But if the book helps, you can go to the library and get it, okay? I really want to bring everybody up to speed in business savvy, because that's where the heart of profitability is, to find out where the money is coming and going, okay? You can be the best grower, marketer, innovator, welder, whatever, but it all goes out the window if your farm fails financially. You're out of business. And I have seen, unfortunately, very well-intentioned, hardworking people start farming, put in their blood, sweat, and tears, spend all their savings, get burnout, and they stop farming. Not the intended result, okay? And so I encourage you to spend more time working on your business, not just in your business. So, that said, welcome to the most unfun, unglamorous, and most fiercely avoided topic in farming, okay? Now, let's see. I don't think that clicker is going to work. Let's see. Is there, would you mind doing that? I'll just signal you if you don't mind doing that. Thank you very much. Okay, this is again, I don't know if you can read it, but this is on the inside of our barn doors. It was 1928, and it says lambs and sheep, and it's got all these hash marks. That is the original record keeping from the Cate family. They settled the farm in 1793, and it was a horse-powered farm, and they raised sheep and cows and And this is still there, 85 years later, you know, just sitting on the barn wall. We have these around the barn, how many loads of hay and all this other kind of things. Record keeping does not have to be hard, and it's pretty permanent and just in pencil. Next. So if there's, next. If there's one thing I want you to take home today, it's this equation, okay? It's the irrefutable business equation of any business. You have to make more money than you spend. Profit equals income minus expense. Next. And profit's gotten a bad rap because of some bad actors on Wall Street and elsewhere. But you know, if you don't like the word profit, use a different word like sustainable income or justifiable income, whatever you want to do. But we all need to make more money than we spend. Okay, that's just, you know, whether you drive a school bus or, you know, are a carpenter for a living, you have to keep within your budget. Okay, next. So for all you math majors, how are these equations different from the one that I asked you to memorize? Of course, you've probably forgotten the first one. Profit equals income minus expenses, what's the one that I want you to remember. This one, income minus expense, is kind of a CSA model farm where, you know, in the wintertime, right now you're starting to get CSA share money coming in, you're loading up your bank account's full, then coming over, you know, May, April, whatever that's going to be, you're going to start spending a lot of money, and at the end of the year you'll have a profit, big or small, at the end of the year. Here, this is more of a traditional farmer's equation where this time of year you don't have a lot of money, but you're spending, you know, money on seeds, fertilizer, bags, labor. Then come May and June, you start to make money and you have a profit left over, big or small. The difference is obviously mathematically nothing except the way here you're being a profit taker as opposed to a profit maker. You want to put profit up front. You want to plan for that profit so you have that in the bank account instead of just hoping at the end of the year that you have enough money to live on. Because guaranteed, well, guaranteed, but it probably won't be. Next. So this equation, profit equals income minus expense, is done annually this time of year, at the end of the year, because you have to for Schedule F, right? But in reality, your farm is made up of a bunch of different equations that then get averaged out into your year-end profit and loss. Okay, so you know, some things might be very profitable. So say, you know, any farm is going to have more than one enterprise that they think. So even a dairy farm's got, you know, replacement heifers, has got hay, they sell manure, all other things that are going on. But you could have, you know, blueberries, carrots, potatoes, pigs, chickens, and goats. Any of these things on your farm, and some are going to be more profitable than others. And I can guarantee you of all the things you do on your farm, they're not going to be equally profitable. And that by uncovering which ones are more profitable and decreasing the ones that are less profitable, your average overall year is going to go up dramatically. Okay? And if I'm making a lot of profit because my sales are high and my expenses are low on a crop, I want to maximize my sales of that. And if I have a crop that's got kind of equal income and expenses, I want to look at that and say, well, can I raise my sales price or can I lower expenses to increase that profitability? And if I have something that's losing money, first of all, why would you grow anything that loses money? I did for 12 years. It's really easy. I can tell you how it's done. If you have 4 species of animals, say, you have meat birds and egg layers, pigs and pigs and goats. You go to the grain store, you buy a bunch of grain, you put it in the barn, you feed all your animals. At the end of the year, you take all your animal sales, and you have a lump sum of $100,000, and you have a grain bill for $80,000. You have no idea which one of those species is actually paying and which ones is losing money. So you could easily have something that's losing money that's getting, you know, buoyed by something that's actually more profitable. So if I have one of these, then I look at it and say, well, can I actually raise the sales price and decrease expenses? And if I can't, I just stop doing it. Because if you're intentionally losing money, I cannot help you. Okay? If you want to lose money, that's not my department. So, and if something is making money, it doesn't mean that I might try to decrease expenses even more and make even more money. I don't want to sound like a capitalist pig dog, but the idea is that, you know, you have to realize that there's a lot of things going on your farm that you want to be able to make money. You want to make hay while the sun is shining, okay? And you might have to do that with certain things, okay? Again, I don't want to be a price gouger in any sense of the word. Next slide. So the idea of like what is net profit, you know, I want to make sure everybody understands what net profit is. It would be like if you were to drive a school bus or work as a carpenter, what your take-home pay would be, okay? And, you know, we compare ourselves, what we're worth by the people around us and, you know, parents, teachers, neighbors. A regular 9-to-5 job is 40 hours a week times 50 weeks a year is 2,000 hours per year. And just to give everybody a way of calibrating that, at $15 an hour, that's $30 a year. $20 an hour, it's around $40,000 a year. So I think most people have a sense of what they're worth per hour more than they might say, well, what am I worth per year or whatever. And next slide, please. And so farmers don't have such a regular work hours. We work a lot more during the growing season, work less in the winter time and in the fall. But roughly it's around the same, probably a little bit more depending on how much you work. So instead of 2,000 hours, it's 2,360 hours. You could, if you were to make a net profit of $23,600, you'd be making $10 an hour, okay? It's a pretty sobering thing to do if you were to take your net profit and divide by all the hours you wanted to do. Because then if you were making $2 an hour, you're saying, well, that's not, doesn't make me feel so good, so I'm not going to look at it. Next. So the whole point of being a profit maker instead of a profit taker is to actually just say, well, how much profit do you want to make on your farm? Okay, how much do you want to actually? What is your worth? You know, I want to make $15 an hour. I want to make $20 an hour. How much do I need to live on, et cetera? So I'm just going to say in this example, I'm not going to make it immediately. I'm going to say 4 years later, I would like to make $30,000 for working on my farm pretty hard for 8 or 9 months of the year. So anybody in the room venture to guess how many gross sales do I need to make in order to squeeze out $30,000? Anybody have a sense of what that might be? There's no wrong answer, actually. 65, did somebody say? 100,000? 300,000? If you're a conventional dairy farmer, it could be 2 million. No, there's one wrong answer, and that's anything less than 30,000, obviously. Okay, you can't make 30,000 with less than 30,000 gross. So next slide. So I'm going to say for round numbers, we're going to need $60,000 in gross sales to extract my $30,000 of net profit. Next slide. So right now, let's just say we're making $10,000 a year with a $2,000 net profit, and I want to get from here, A to B. I could just say, okay, next year I'm going to grow $60,000 worth of product, or more realistically, you want to do it incrementally. So next slide. That you would then build your sales slowly, extracting more net income proportionally or even more so as you go along. So right now, this is like a roadmap of how I'm going to get to my $30,000. Remember, this is the ball to keep your eye on because that's what you want to make. That's your goal. You just need to raise your sales up in order to squeeze out that net profit, okay? Next slide. So in that example, I wanted to make, I think, $19,000 or $18,000 in the second year. And I figured out, well, where am I going to be able to get that $19,000? So I survey the marketing landscape around me and say I could sell on the web, I could sell to co-op, I could sell to restaurants, I could sell farmers market, CSAs. And then I kind of say, of all those different places, you know, what do I want to grow? And it depends on what your land's good for or what you like to grow, anything like that. So basically, I just make a spreadsheet that outlines the things that I want to grow and the places that I think that I can sell to or that I have traditionally sold to that I know the numbers for. And so for beets, I'll say at the farmer's market, I can sell a bag a week, you know, which is equal 200 pounds total at $2 a pound. That's $400. co-op doesn't want any, but the restaurant does. They buy them wholesale at a lower price, a little bit more. But in the end, it's 500 pounds of beets that that I think I can sell for $700. That's okay. Said I could do the same thing with carrots, beets, and potatoes. $700 for figuring out the beets. That's a long ways from $60,000. But that's exactly how it's done. And you could have 20 different accounts, and you could have 40 different crops or animals, but it's a piece by piece putting together. That's how you put together a marketing plan. Next, please. So if you're to do it with the animals, meat species, you take a meat bird that dresses out at 4.5 pounds at $3, 33 pence, $50 a bird. The numbers add up more quickly. All of a sudden, you're at $12,000. I'm a lot closer to my $60,000 gross sales. Can I extract that $30,000 out of that? We're going to get to that in the second part of the talk. Next. So if you are to do everything, fill in all the blanks of the vegetable marketing chart, I would do my beets, I would do my carrots, I would do my lettuce over a 10-week period, I would do my potatoes, and I can do the different accounts that I think I can sell, and then I can total how much I think I'm going to make at the farmer's market or at the co-op, or I can total how much I'm going to have in beets or carrots or lettuce or potatoes. This is an incredibly succinct one-page piece of information that basically you could run my farm if I gave you this sheet. Okay, it has all the information needed for you to grow everything and sell to all my accounts. And every year I take this one that I did the year before and I think, well, I think farmers markets are going up 20% every year. The food co-op just opened up another branch nearby. I can double sales. The restaurant went out of business, et cetera, and I can adjust it. Sometimes I just put up arrows or down arrows, during the year at the end of the season to get a sense of that. So in this case, too, it cross totals to my gross sales, whether it's by the things that I'm growing or by the places that I'm selling it to. It's $19,000, okay? So in that example, I think we needed 1,200 pounds of beets that I think I could sell. So how do I get those beets from that marketing chart to the point in these bags on the loading dock that will convert into dollar bills, which then I will put into my bank account? Next. And I have a lot of questions about those beets, and are they a 2-row crop or a 3-row crop? What kind of fertility needs do they have? Do they need irrigation? Do they need row covers, deer protection? Any of those kind of questions about just the how-to of how to grow beets. It's a pretty, I need to be able to somehow make sure that I know how to get that 1,200 pounds of beets. Next. So what I do is for years, I just used a yellow pad, one of these yellow pads, and I would just write maybe 3 or 4 lines, say beets, and I would write down the important things that I needed to do to grow these beets. And so here, first of all, if I needed 1,200 pounds, that's my goal, I'm going to say the yield per bed is 600 pounds, so I need 2 beds. I'm going to plant one early and one a little bit later, so they're staggered. I have a projected gross sales of 1,600. I'm going to split it between red and gold beet varieties, and my planting dates are going to be a month apart to spread it out. And I want 5 live seeds per row foot to get a good stand in a 3-row bed. So that's all. Again, I could hand you my production plan, and you could pretty much run my farm because it has enough information to do exactly what is intended. Do the same thing with carrots, do the same thing with lettuce, and I'm figuring out an 80% pick on average. And so, I didn't do all the different plantings. I plant every 2 weeks instead of every week because they enough overlap. I till half as much, I plant half as much, time-wise. And so then, again here, one of the important things here, I figure out whether it's 16 beds or 16 acres, this is the amount of land that's going to be needed. And if I don't have 16 beds or 16 acres available to me, then I have to go back to the drawing board and adjust this to make sure it fits on my land base or rent more land. Next, please. So what I do, and I use one of these lecture pads in my office, and I have one for each field that I grow on, and they're not all rectangle, so I make different shapes of the fields that they're on. and I actually just write down what I'm going to grow and put it on a map. And this is a pretty creative process where you're balancing a lot of different things like rotations, earliness, all grouping all the things that are long seasons versus mid-season, things that are all plastic or covered, or things that need to be in sandier soils or not. So, again, I just make a map and I say here beets, my first planting, my second planting, carrots, my first planting, and then a bigger second planting, lettuce every 2 weeks, and so there's going to be, one planting here, one planting here, one planting here, potatoes, and cover crop. So again, this is a one-page visual representation of my farm that I gave that to you. You could run my farm and vice versa. Again, it's got all the information. It wouldn't tell you where it's going to be sold to, but it would tell you exactly how to grow it, or where it's going to go on the farm. So it does take a little bit of creativity, and once you have this, so again, I have, not anymore, but I had like 10 years of them on my thing, so I could actually look on my wall in my office, and I could look back for potatoes. I could see where potatoes were planted last year, the year before, So for rotation purposes or family rotation, it's really easy to do it that way. Next. So everything, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I've been thinking about this, and I plan for my net profit. I'm looking around at my marketplace trying to figure out what I can sell where. I make a production plan. I'm feeling pretty smug. So I go out and seed my beets, great. I seed my carrots, great. So then I say, oh, it's May 1st, I gotta go transplant my lettuce, and I go, where's my lettuce transplants? It's not like I can go to the 7-Eleven and buy lettuce transplants, and you can buy them more readily now, but generally most farmers will grow their own. So for any transplanted crop, you want to have a separate calendar, next slide, that just shows the planting of the seeding of that crop for any transplanted crop that will then get transplanted on time. So if I need a 750 lettuce plants on May 1st, I back up 4 weeks to seed them here so they're ready in time. So any transplanted crop, pretty mechanical, I think most of you do this already, that you just want to have some kind of chart. I just use a regular bookkeeping pad for that, or a spreadsheet now. So next. So I'm going over this pretty quickly. We'll have a lot of time for questions. If you have questions anytime, I'll answer them if I'm not going to get to it later. Just a quick review of where we've gone, and that is, first of all, I'm planning for net profit. I want to know how much I want to make. That's the thing you want to be looking at. And then I survey my marketing landscape and say, what can I sell to whom? What do I want to grow? What's my land good for? And I make a marketing chart. Once I make this marketing chart, I have an idea of what I need to grow to saturate my market to support my gross sales. That'll get me my net sales, my net profit. So I make a production plan for how to grow each crop. I put it on a map, and then I have a seedling calendar for anything. These are kind of mechanical things, once you get down to that point. Next. So far, we've been looking at generating enough gross sales in order to support a net profit that you want, okay? Again, keep your eye on the correct moving object. That it's a macro, we're kind of looking at the macro equation. We're trying to generate $100,000 of sales so we can get, or $60,000 worth of sales so we can get $30,000 in net. This is my son and an employee at Farmers Market, which is, a town of 8,000, but a very busy market. And we do really well, but this is a great case of like, we're taking in a lot of money, but where is that money actually coming from? Where is that, that we come back and we have $2,000 or $3,000 in our apron, we go like, well, where is it, how does this relate? Is it from carrots or beets or tomatoes? We don't really have any sense. Next. So in order to kind of go to instead of the macro view of like how to get all the sales into your bank account in the first place, I want to start now looking at how to analyze the difference between carrots, beets, blueberries, pigs, chickens, or anything else to see which one's making money and rate them side by side in terms of profitability, so you can make good business decisions. I forgot all about it. I have this handout for you guys. and I'll pass these out. I'll just explain what, here you go. The handout, in the handout you'll see all the PowerPoint slides, so you don't need to copy all the slides. I'm sorry if you've done that already. And then after the slideshow, you'll see a few reference sheets of yields, one from the UVM extension, which is very good for New England yields if you're in New England. And you'll also see in the back a project that, or you're going to see a bunch of fine print worksheets that I'm just going to touch on briefly at the end of the talk. And then at the very end, there's a project from NOFA, Vermont. And if you were to go to, NOFA is the Northeast Organic Farming Association, but if you went to nofavt.org and then look at cost, Google or search cost of production, okay? There's some very good information about cost of production for different crops in New England, 3-state project that we did, and we've got some very telling numbers and informative stuff. So when we're trying to figure out the profitability of carrots versus beets versus chickens or pigs, we want to kind of know what how much sales went for each pig or chicken, and what the expenses are for each pig and chicken. So we're going to start with sales first, and then we'll do expenses. So sales, next. Sales is money coming into your farm when you sell something, right? And so you want to be able to track these with different, you want to be able to track all the sales that are leaving your farm, so you can then compile all the sales together and figure out how much money you got for the pigs or blueberries. So of these different ways money comes to your farm, invoice sales is if you're wholesaling, simple invoice book. If I were to, Eliza wanted to buy 2 bags of carrots, and so I'm going to say on 12/7/18, Eliza, 2 bags of carrots at $30 each, that's $60. And I bring them over here, and she doesn't have any money, but if you don't mind initialing that invoice, just so that you're acknowledging the transaction. And if she gave me money or a check with it, that'd be fine, but she gets a copy, usually the original, I get this. I can put it in the back here or put it back in my office. And this is a paper trail. So this is a paper trail that is bulletproof, and this is why every business in the world uses it, okay? Because it tells you the date, it tells you the quantity, and it tells you the amount, and it's signed for. And so if you don't pay, I can go to small claims court and say, well, you signed for it, and I expect my money. It's a fair trade. We all want fair trade, right? So if you can invoice anything, I would invoice anything, okay? Usually wholesale accounts, but you could do it, to a friend or, across the table, across like that. CSA, how many people do CSAs? Quite a few? Okay, CSAs are a great concept. I loved it. I had one for 6 years. It worked great. We stopped for reasons, not that it wasn't great. Traditionally there's a lot of different ways CSAs work, but often you'll get a trifold flyer in the mail saying Cate Farms, sign up for Cate Farms, CSA, $500 for 20 weeks of distribution. That works out to be $25 a week, right? And you fill out this little thing, you tear it off, you put your check in the mail. I get a bunch of checks in the mail with a little tag, I put it in the bank. So I might generate $70,000 of CSA sales, and I put it in the bank, and I have all these little names that I have associated with it. So some farms I do 70,000, maybe 100,000, maybe $200,000 worth of CSA sales, and it's in the bank, but you have absolutely no idea what that represents. You have no idea. So in order to do that, it's not hard, and it doesn't even take that much time. So, and you're already doing most of the work already. So every week when you make a distribution of your CSA, 1 head of lettuce, 2 pounds of spinach, 1 tomato, 1 cuke, or whatever else like that, you're writing it down on a chalkboard, people pick it up or however you do it. Then all you need to do is just say, okay, well, I have 70 shares times 2 heads of lettuce, that's 140 heads. All you have to do is have a spiral bound notebook or something that just records what I wrote, what I distributed every week, times the number of shares that I sold. And all of a sudden I have a very real record, just like that bulletproof invoice, of what left the farm through the CSA. Not hard, takes 30 seconds a week, really. It's not that much. How about farmer's market? People go to farmer's market? I went 25 years, I loved it, but I do like my Saturdays right now. Again, we would go to farmer's market and we would make $2,000 or $3,000 or more have cash and checks, we'd bring them home. We load up market, go to the market, set up, break it down, come back, unload into the cooler or not, and then we're exhausted by the end of the whole thing, put our feet up, and we put the money in an area to go to the bank. At the end of the year, again, $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 worth of sales that I have absolutely no idea what it represents. Not a good thing, okay? So, I mean, it's not, like if you have a profit and loss statement, which is, income minus all the categories of expenses, if you have income of, $500,000 and you have no idea what that represents, it doesn't really do you any good in terms of figuring out how you're making money or not. So it's not hard, and you're doing most of the work already. Generally, when you're packing up for the farmer's market, you have a clipboard that has everything that you want to bring, and you say, okay, I want to bring 8 boxes of tomatoes, 2 boxes of cukes, 3 boxes of lettuce, et cetera, like that. And so all you need to do is put a date on it, and then put down what you actually brought, and then another column for what you bring back. So next slide, that you basically have a beginning inventory. I'm going to bring 4 bags of beets, 6 bags of carrots. And then 15 minutes before market closes up, so at 12:45, I go around, or one of my employees goes around, and I just look down. I don't weigh everything out. I just say, that's about a half a bushel of carrots. That's about 3/4 of bushels of beets. I can count heads of cabbage. I can count bunches of carrots, those kind of things. And so then all I'm doing, I'm not doing the math. I'm just making a physical record of what I'm bringing back, okay? So then I take what I put a date on it, and I take my cash box sales total of $2,200 right there. And then I just put that away for analyzation, or for analyzing, this time of year when I have more time. You could do it right then and there if you want, or if it's a rainy day. But I'm a busy person usually during the growing season, so I wait. So then you can do the math, and you can subtract it and say the net quantity sold of 2.5 bags. And then I can say, well, $2 a pound, it should be about so much money. And then I can add up all that, and if that total does not add up to my sales total, then I take the bigger items and I adjust it so they all match up. And now all of a sudden I have a very accurate record of everything I sold at farmer's market. The key is to do it 15 minutes before market's over, while you're still in that mode. Because once you get in that truck, I can tell you it probably will not happen.
Also to do it before you trade eggs to the bread guy.
That too. Or, but those are smaller amounts unless you're doing a ton of sales that way. And could you go back a slide, please? So the farmer's market, you do the inventory sheet. The farm stand, you do the same thing, and the only difference would be, forward again, please, that you would have another column in the middle here that would say additional. So if you're growing beets and you run out of beets and you go add another bag of beets, you'd have another column here saying 4 bags start plus 1 minus your ending inventory. That's the only difference, really. Cash registers now have it so you can actually do a very fine job with inventory control. Next. So then once you do that, once you have the CSA farmers market and farm stand sales itemized, now you can actually know how many beets you sold, or carrots, or lettuce, or potatoes at the farmer's market, and have a real sense of what your total sales for each crop and each account is. And in a perfect world, that would you would match your marketing projection, but I'm sorry to say it's not a perfect world. But the idea is, you're targeting that kind of gross sales. Again, this is an incredibly succinct one-page picture of my farm. It doesn't give quantities just because I didn't want too many numbers on this one, but it will tell you so much about what I'm growing and where it's going to. Next. So this is my son, Flint. He broke his leg really bad, and so this is an electric G here that's battery powered. and there's no clutch. So we gave him all these jobs that he could do without a leg, without using his leg, and it worked out great. But anyway, so he's cultivating on a G, and you know, there's parsnips here, gold beets, red beets, and some spinach, and you know, we have to figure out, okay, well, you know, how much work is going into each one of these things. Next. So we're going to do expenses, and expenses, some expenses are, you know, you pay by check or cash or credit card, and again, it's very easy to track because the business that you're buying from is going to give you a piece of paper, okay? It's incumbent upon them to give you a piece of paper because they want your money, just like I want my money from Eliza, so I have a piece of paper to show it, okay? And so they're doing all the work for you. They're doing the paper trail for you. Very simple. Next. But so I buy my beets, and I buy my beet seed rather. I buy my fertilizer, I buy my row cover, all invoiced. Great. I have a total record of that to the penny, and bags that I'm going to ship them in. Super. But what about everything in between? Like the time that I take my beet seed and then I push my seeder, you know, back and forth over 700-foot beds, or I go out there and weed it, or have my crew weed it, and then I irrigate it, and I hoe it, and I take my tractor, basket it. You know, all these things that are happening before I actually harvest it and put it in the bag to sell. There's no record of that whatsoever. There's a record to some degree because I'm paying my employees, so Eliza works for me for 40 hours a week at $15 an hour. There's a paper trail there, but it doesn't really tell me what Eliza did during the week. She didn't tell me that she weeded beets for 4 hours and carrots for 2 hours. And what about the time that I walk into the field as a farmer? I don't get a paycheck. I'm, you know, the business owner. That when I start going into the field and actually pulling carrots or weeding the beets, how do I account for my time? This is the hardest nut to crack because there's no systems really in place for in QuickBooks or anywhere else for you to track this kind of thing. So what I do is it's a simple thing. I just have I have a bunch of these, 27 of them at home, 27 years worth, that these are incredibly important to me. They're just a chronological listing of the things that I do on the farm, and not everything that I do on the farm, but just specific things that I do on the farm. So again, it's just a simple, I have a pocket folder so I can keep some certain notes in there if I want to, but I have, you know, one for each greenhouse, and then alphabetically one for beets, carrots, daikon, eggplant, etc. And, you know, my whole year's work on beets, you know, can fit on that one page. So April 15th, I go out and I fertilize and chisel it, bed form it. April 16th, I go out and seed it. Nothing happens for 2 weeks. I go out there and then I run the baskets over it. Another 2 weeks passes, I run the baskets over it. Another 2 weeks, I come back there and I irrigate it or hand weed it. Nothing happens for 3 weeks. And then I go out there, irrigate again. Nothing happens for 3 weeks, then I harvest it. So all, you know, it's not a lot of lines, but you know, all that information can fit on here. But when I do that, I always are using, I'm very conscious of using rates. So rates would mean two variables like weeding bed feet per hour, picking bushels per hour, or, you know, 1 ounce of seed per 700 bed feet. Those kind of things, two variables, or even three if you want to. So next slide, please.
How many cups do you want in there?
So I'm going to say, this is going to sound funny coming from a person like me, I want you to take as less records as possible, okay?
Yeah.
And so I want you, if you're going to do this, I would take your top 3 sellers, because your top 3 sellers are going to affect your bank account more than anything else, okay? If you sell $200 worth of radishes, that's not going to make or break you. But if you're selling $10,000 worth of tomatoes, you want to know if you're making money on those. So I would definitely track those 3. And don't worry about everything else, okay? And focus on rates. And so if you're growing salad mix, right, and you're growing 20 different seedings of salad mix during the course of the year, it doesn't take you any different. You don't have to track all 20 seedlings. You might want to track 1 or 2. But for you to push a seeder up and down, it's not going to take you any longer in May, April, or July, right? And to cut or to wash and bag salad mix is going to take you the exact same amount of time no matter what time of year it is. So if you know that you can pick 25 pounds an hour of salad greens, and you can wash and bag 50 pounds an hour, you check that rate 2 or 3 times, that's all you do. Stop taking numbers. Okay, does everybody understand that concept? Once you know these things, they're not going to change that much. And then you don't, to build a budget, that's all you really need to do. So this is in your handout, and you can look at it more closely in your handout. But this is a 1/4 acre of carrots. Okay, you would never read my handwriting, but so that's why I type it up. But generally, all it is a chronological listing of the things that I'm doing on a bed of carrots. Okay, so anytime I walk on or drive onto that bed of carrots on April 23rd, I'm fertilizing and disking it, and I chisel it, and I seed it. Again, I write things like hole number 10 in my Planet Junior, so I know that if I come back and it's too thin or thick, I can adjust it. Seed some bolero. Then I come back 2 weeks later, I flame weed, I basket, irrigate, hand weed, basket again, do another quick hand weed. Then I harvest, and then I can do a rate of harvest, or I can track every single time. And then I disc, and then I seed it with a cover crop at the end of the year. And then I wash and pack. And I have these rates here, 7 bags per hour, or at 2 hours per acre kind of thing. So I'm keeping track of those kind of things. And I'm keeping track of person hours, but also if it's used in an equipment, I write down how much hours the equipment's being used, okay? That makes sense. It's just a chronological listing. It's not hard to do. And again, do 3 crops, do 1 crop. And you don't need any records. You could do a projected crop very easily just from what's in your head. And if you don't have exact numbers, you'll have a real sense of what needs to happen. And the numbers you don't have, you'll then track when you go out in the field, weed beats or whatever it is. Next, please. Next slide, please. Next. So go back one. I'm sorry. Sorry, you did go. I didn't realize you'd gone already. Sorry. Okay, so then here, this is a crop budget. This is a very simple crop budget, even though there's a lot of numbers on there. Again, it's my 1/4 acre of carrots up here, and now I can actually take all my crop journal things, and I'll say, of that half hour of labor, this is at $12.55 an hour labor and $5 tractor costs. I can then say, these are my costs and my product costs of the fertilizer. And then I can add up all my labor, all my machinery, and all my product costs and get a total cost of the total expenses that I put into this 1/4 acre of carrots, right? Because now, because through my crop journal, I've got a very accurate record of all the inputs. And then through my sales spreadsheet, I have a very accurate record of what I sold carrot-wise. And so retail, I sell fewer bags at a higher price. And then wholesale, I sell a lot more bags at a lower price. And I get a total sales of $5,700, okay? So I have sales of $5,700. Where to go? And I have expenses of $1,800. And so that's $3,900 before I account for fixed costs like tax, insurance, electricity, advertising, that kind of thing. So $3,900 for a 1/4 acre comes out to be $15,000 an acre net profit. Is that good or bad? I don't know. I thought it was pretty good. It's not negative. And if I grew 2 acres, I'd almost be making my $30,000 net income goal, and we could all go home, right? But the truth is, I knew that $16,000 net profit before fixed expenses was good. I mean, it was good, but I didn't have a real sense of it. Next slide. And, yep. I'm going to get to that later. Yep. So I didn't really have a sense of, whether I knew it wasn't negative, but I didn't know if it was like the real profitable ones or the marginally profitable ones of everything else I did. It was like a stake in the ground that I put in the ground. I don't really know. I knew it was positive, but that's about all I needed. You need other budgets to compare. That's why I say do 2 or 3 of your top sellers. So next. So when I started doing these budgets, this is my wife Sally in her office here. I was trying to figure out how much it cost me to grow 100 lettuce plants, right? It took me 2 days to figure it out. and I'm really glad I did. And I will show you how, I'll give you the information so you don't have to redo it. But there are a lot of questions that will come up when you're making a budget, like how much a tractor or machinery costs, how much it is to deliver to a wholesale account versus farmer's market, what your overhead costs are, these kind of costs you spread out over your whole business, you know, how much that costs. So next slide. There's a bunch of things that once you figure out once, they will just pay off every time you do a crop budget. And I'm going to go over some of these, so we'll just actually do a couple of examples right now. So next. So if you go to your handout and you look at the worksheet 1, there's a lot of fine print, but I don't want to get bogged down on the fine print. I just want to go over some bigger stuff. For the book, I had to do the fine print because it had to be completely transparent to the reader, and I apologize if it's confusing, but there's a lot of information packed in a small space. But just to be very clear about what's happening, or I'll just go over it broad brush strokes. For labor, if I pay somebody $10 an hour, then I had on employee taxes, workers' comp, and some non-assigned time, it's going to cost me, the business, $12.55 an hour, okay? And I could pay a composite manager more and a crew less, but I'm just going to say everybody's getting $12.55 an hour. And that's like a lot less than, this is 10 years old, and a lot less than what we pay now. So given that rate of hour, for me to do a wholesale run to Montpelier back, which is 20 miles round trip, takes me, you know, half hour to load up the truck, whether it's got 1 case or 50 cases in it, drive through Smooth, come back, and then it's $33 to run my truck back and forth to Montpelier. Good thing to know. Farmer's market, same thing. I load the truck, everything. Imagine a pallet of produce in the walk-in cooler. I can either sell it wholesale in the truck, or I can sell it farmer's market. If I want to go to farmer's market, I take that same pallet of produce and I load the truck. I travel to market. I set up. I spend 4 hours, 2 people, 4 hours vending. I pack up, make my inventory first, pack up, travel home, unpack, tally sales. I charge 40 cents for the vehicle. I have rental fees. I have amortized farmer's market equipment, all the scales, umbrellas, tables, all that kind of stuff, spread out your useful life, divided by the number of markets per year, so it's not that much. But generally, at $12 an hour, it's $250 just for the cost of doing 1 market, okay? $250, you should know that number for your own self. Most people do their own market, they don't pay themselves, or they're not charging themselves, so they say, well, it doesn't cost me that much as well. If your time is free, come work for me, you know, because you really have to, you know, one thing I can guarantee you we all share in this room is you only have 24 hours in a day. And we have to use them wisely because some of them is needed for sleep and food and family. And so make use of the time that you do have to work. Your work hours are a limited resource, so you put a value on them. So farmer's market again. So if it costs you $250 to go to farmer's market and you're only making $200 at the farmer's market in sales, you might be better off wholesaling it, right? Or look at it as a promotion saying this is a promotional effort for me to sell my CSA shares or to, you know, pump up my farm stand sales. But that's a promotion just like if I were to take out a print ad in the newspaper or a radio ad on the radio, okay? That's a cost of doing business. Okay, that's just to be clear. I'm all for farmers markets. I did it for a long time, but we also knew the numbers and we had to achieve sales goals to make it work. Overhead costs here are listed. And these are the things that are spread out over the entire business, website or the phone or landfill costs, those kind of things. And those can add up to be quite a bit. And then once you have your overhead costs, you can allocate it to acreage or by crop or by however you want to do it. But you just have to be fair. You have to pay for these overhead costs out of your crop budgets. Out of that carrot budget, one of the fixed costs you'd be subtracting from that $15,000 net income would be taking out some for paying for your electric bill. Next. And in this novavt.org study, you'll see that a lot of farms, you know, overhead costs can be $20,000 or $30,000 per farm, and it could be as much as $1,500 per acre, you know, and so it adds up, and it's just the cost of doing business. And if you don't pay for them through crop budgets, you're going to be getting an off-farm job to pay these things, or they're going to turn the lights out on you. Next. So this is in your worksheet too, and I'm going to go over this very quickly in your handout. But in order for me to figure out how much that 100 lettuce plants cost me to grow, I had to figure out first the size. I grow them at so nomenclature-wise, 606 is 6 6-packs. This is industry standard. 804 is 8 4-packs, and 806 is 8 6-packs. Okay, a 1020 is a 10-inch by 20 tray. Inserts fit into that. Okay, that's just to get everyone on the same page. A 128 or a 98 are plug trays. They're individual cells within that 10-inch by 20-inch size. So I first took all the plastic, the cost of the plastic, the number, how much the soil was in it, how long it took to fill it, and cost of the labor, and then I come up with these figures at the end of saying, okay, for around $2 or whatever it's going to be, I can have a plastic container filled with soil. Next. And then if we were just to look at this top one here of saying a bedding plant, bench greenhouse, I'm going to say that this is a while ago obviously, but the structure cost 21 by 96 2-layer poly with heat and ventilation is going to cost $8,000 to build. It's going to last 20 years, so it cost me $400 a year just to own it. And then there's annual costs of like replaceable poly, electricity, fuel for heat, watering labor, and then I add in my allocation of overhead to that, and so it's about $5,000 a year that it's costing me to own that greenhouse. That greenhouse can hold 1,000 of these 1020 trays, and I get two cycles, 2 footprints. Is that the right word? Of bench space. And so once I know that, I say, I've got a capacity of 1,000 times 2, and so basically it costs me about $2.60 per flat for that greenhouse housing costs, right? And then I can add in my other costs of the plastic and seating, and these numbers are low now because everything's gone up in price, but it's going to be in the $10 to $15 range. Okay, if it's a $10 per 100 tray flat, 10 cents a plant. That's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to know that number, 10 cents a plant for a lettuce plant, and then I can plug that into the budgets. And you can plug that into the budgets anywhere else. This is all, if anybody wants this, if you don't want to buy the book and you don't want to go to the library and get the CD, I will email you the file, and then you can plug in your own numbers. It's all just on a spreadsheet. Okay, my email is catefarm, C-A-T-E, @gmail.com. Next slide. So here's the tractor costs, and I'm going to use an example of a 1980s or so 2-wheel drive tractor, okay? It's a utility tractor and very functional on a diversified vegetable farm. So, and no bucket. So does anybody have an idea of what that would go if you were to look on Craigslist, what you'd find for a 1980s diesel tractor, 2-wheel drive? 10,000? 8,000, let's say 8,000. It might be 10,000. I'm going to say it's a little bit for an 80s tractor, 8,000, somewhere in there. This is more of a math example. I didn't mean to override you there. So if I pay $8,000 and then I use it for 10 years and then I sell it, do you think it'll have any value to it after 10 years if I keep it up in good shape? Yeah, I'm thinking that my salvage value could be, $4,000, maybe $3,000. I'll say $3,000 to be on the safe side. So that means that equals $5,000 divided by the 10 years equals $500 a year. Okay? So my annual cost of owning that tractor is $500 a year. Okay, so it's just depreciating. Just like when you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, every year it depreciates $1,200 around there, $1,000 to $1,200. You're just losing money, but you get the use of your car. What are some other costs of owning a tractor? Fuel, repairs, maybe interest, but let's skip the interest for now. Fuel-wise, if you're going to use it, 100 hours, tractors use an hour meter, not a mileage meter, and so an hour is how they measure the use. If you use it 100 hours and you're getting 5 hours per gallon, that'd be 20 gallons of fuel. So times it, so $150. We'll say 200 bucks. $200 a year for fuel and repairs. Some years you're just going to do an oil change. It's an older tractor. Some years you're going to do an oil change. Some years you're going to have to replace a rear tire or radiator or a clutch. So on average, you know, some years it might only be a $50 oil change. Some years it might be $500. But I'm just going to say on average, $400. You know, that'd be $4,000 over the course of 10 years, which is quite a, you know, a bunch of money. So if I add all that up, that's going to be $700, $1,100 a year. That's costing me to have that tractor in my shed ready to use 24/7. So if I use it at 100 hours, that equals $11 an hour. Is that a lot or little? I think it's pretty cheap. I think you can't rent a bike for $11 an hour. And, you know, the idea is that you have a tool that is, I'm not trying to sell you tractors, okay? I just want to shine a light on what's going on in your business, right? And so, you know, for $11 an hour to use a tractor at any point, that's pretty good. And if you were to use it 200 hours, you'd spend probably a little bit more money in fuel, but we're talking $5.50 an hour, okay? And just to make a point, even though it's not really mathematically correct, if you used it 1 hour, it would cost you $1,100 an hour. That's obviously no fuel and no repairs. The point I'm trying to make is that when you use it 100 to 200 hours, if you only use a tractor a little bit, the math doesn't work as well, okay? I just bought a brand new $17,000 tractor, and it's a 70 horsepower tool drive tractor, and it'll probably sell for probably $12,000 10 years from now, and I'll only have oil changes in it for the next 10 years. It'll probably be less than that in terms of having a brand new tractor in my shed. Again, I'm not trying to sell you tractors. Next slide. Yes.
One of the things you can do with some of this analysis too is make comparisons if you're equipment and it's very frequently, you're going to, like out west a lot of people touch the tank.
Yep.
No longer own their own equipment, just pay somebody else to do it for them because of these kinds of numbers. Maintaining your pay equipment that you use twice a year, while the custom guy that's really expensive and comes around and quotes you rates, that's how you know the 1 hour at $1,100.
So you bring up a very good point in that a tractor that you're using for 200 hours, which on a farm, diversified vegetable farm, that's what I use a tractor for, you know, because I'm bush hogging, I'm tilling, I'm, you know, using a lifter, whatever it is, I'm using it quite a bit. Haying equipment, unfortunately, costs a lot of money and it depreciates dramatically quickly, and you only use it for a very small amount of hours, and yet every farm in this room has to have it because when you have 3 days of sunny weather in June, everybody wants it. It can't be passed around, right? And so you end up having this expensive machinery that depreciates that you're using less, and you get, instead of, you know, $11 an hour, you're getting like $35 an hour just to run your baler. And it's like, then all of a sudden the numbers, so that's where custom or a person doing that makes sense.
Or you might decide, I'm just going to buy it.
Or buy hay, that's right, right. But that's a good point. And you can, so the other thing is you can do this with machinery. So machines that have no moving parts, like a bed lifter or a plow, you pay $500 for, and you have no repairs in it, you could probably sell for $500 10 years later, has no cost hardly at all. Whereas a manure spreader, which is just the personification of depreciation, because it just starts rotting on you the day you get it, that will actually, you know, devalue quite a bit, you know, and so it costs more per hour. Plus it's got like a combine's got lots of moving parts. That just is, it's going to cost you more money, okay? Okay, so now everybody could look at their broccoli in their pamphlet. There's a crop enterprise budget that says broccoli. Okay, so in this, again, it's mind-numbingly complicated, and I apologize for that. And my own budgets aren't this complicated because I do this again for the transparency for the reader. But okay, so for broccoli, we're going to do 1/10 of an acre of broccoli, and chronologically order. I do preparing soil, I seed and transplant. I cultivate, spray, all that, and I harvest it, and then once it's in the field, in the pack house, I bunch it and put it into boxes and put it in a cooler, After the crop is done, I mow the crop, I disc it and seed a cover crop, and I have a total of all my field expenses is $422 for this 1/10 of an acre, right? Then I have some marketing costs associated with calls and farmers market expenses, and I have my overhead costs. So my total costs for this 1/10 acre of broccoli is $790, right? And then again, I have sales of retail, which is higher, less but higher priced per unit, and wholesale more but at a lower price. And so I have sales of $906. And so I have a total net profit of $115 per 1/10 of an acre, or $1,100 per acre net profit. And that's after paying myself. That's paying all the marketing costs, all the overhead costs, everything that's possible. So if I were to grow 10 acres, I'd have $11,000, okay? It would scale. You might even make more because you'd have some economies of scale. Is that good or bad? 10 acres of broccoli for 11,000 bucks? I mean, if I had a market for 10 acres of broccoli that was easy, I might do it. Yeah. Right? Okay, flip your page over to, next slide, to kale. Now, kale is a cousin of broccoli, same planting, same spacing, same spraying, same fertility, pretty much identical, right? And so the same thing, you're going to go through chronologically. You prepare soil, you seed, you cultivate, you harvest it. The thing about harvesting is that instead of like with broccoli, you might not get 100% cut, so you're only cutting 80% of the plants. With kale, you're actually getting 2 to 3 bunches or maybe more, depending on where you are, per plant. So you have a lot more labor in harvesting, right? Because you're getting multiple picks, and you still have the same post-harvest crop and marketing and overhead costs. And so here, your total cost for the same 1/10 acre of kale is like $1,300. It's more than the broccoli, right? So you're going like, well, that stinks. But then you do the same thing, you retail and wholesale. But because you're getting multiple bunches per plant, you have a much higher gross sales, and then your net profit all of a sudden is $2,400 for a 1/10 of an acre, or $24,000 net profit per acre for kale. Now, if you haven't been paying attention all day, I would just start paying attention right now, because that is real money, and there's no funny, magic stuff in this. Okay, this is just the fact that if you do the math and uncover this, you can make some money. Okay. Before I did this, my accounts were clamoring for broccoli, and kale was like, oh yeah, sure, we'll take a case of kale. And even I look at, this is back in the old days, I'd look at kale as like that inedible thing on a restaurant plate, it was always left over at the end, and kind of like, tough and, but once I did this, all of a sudden said, I like kale. It's like frost hardy, it's lightweight, it's upright, I can pick it, I get multiple picks, it's like, and I'm taking money home to the bank hand over fist. $24,000 an acre. I could grow 1 acre of kale and almost make my net income goals. And I'd be like having so much free time on the side too. So, and I do this because the point of it is that the math pays in order to uncover what your profit centers are. And they don't have to be this complicated. You can do them on the back of an envelope, okay? And I can do any budget from anybody here on anything on that lecture pad in probably 10 minutes to give you a sense of where your money's coming and going. It's not hard. You just have to sit down and do it. And the last thing I want to do is sound like some person who says you can make $1 gajillion off a 1/4 acre. But what I do want to say is that you can make good money in farming. You have to know where to do it. And that even if you can't sell an acre of kale, you might sell a 1/10 of an acre of kale and a 1/10 of an acre of parsley and a 1/10 of an acre of chard and other high-value crops, and you can piece together an acre of different crops and make that and net that same $24,000. Okay. Has anybody ever heard of Roger Bannister? You heard of Roger Bannister, right? He's a runner, right? Roger, too bad, it's really sad that not a lot of people heard about Roger Bannister. Anyway, back in 1954, Roger Bannister is a guy who's a runner, and he broke the 4-minute mile, right? And so for thousands of years, humans have been trying to break the 4-minute mile, and they haven't. Okay, since Greek and Roman times, they've been trying to run. They would, do all sorts of training programs. They would drink tiger's milk, real tiger's milk. They would get chased by tigers. They would do everything to try to get people to run faster than 4 minutes a mile. They couldn't do it. They figured that it was just a human body or, wind resistance. You couldn't break that barrier. So in 1954, along comes Roger Bannister, and he breaks the 4-minute mile. Huge news. It's just, this is like unbelievable. This is great, and it's like so exciting. And so here, if I was Roger Bannister, I'd be going like, God, I just broke a 1,000-year-old record. I'm sitting pretty, man. I'm going to be famous. Not quite. But, so what happens? The very next year, 37 people break the 4-minute mile. The year after that, 300 people break the 4-minute mile. So what happened? Did like some huge quantum leap in evolution happen in 1954 or 55? Did Nike come out with some new shoe that made everybody fast? What's that?
The price of tiger's milk went down?
Yeah, or a new Cliff Bar might have been out. I don't know. The point of this example is that nothing had changed except what was in people's minds, okay? And if you know that mental barrier is broken, you can achieve it. And I use that for this example because there are crops out here like that you can make this kind of money on. I can grow crops conventionally. I can compete against conventional crops at Walmart and still make very good money. And so you just have to do the math to figure out which ones those are. I don't have time in this workshop to do that. That's kind of a longer workshop. But there are, there's plus all the, not pedestrian vegetables, but the vegetables that you're all growing, there's a lot of ones that make good money and there's some that do not make good money. And I think you have to, if you just know which ones are which, start, then focusing on that. But to answer your question earlier, it's like, don't take all the numbers, just take the top 3 sellers of your farm. Figure out now where your existing markets are and if you're currently making money. Do you have any questions? Yes.
It feels like most of this applies to people who are majority of wholesale, but you have recommendations for people who the majority of their business is CSA.
Do I have suggestions for, I'm repeating the question for the microphone, and you're saying that if instead of the majority for wholesale, you have answers for, or suggestions for majority of your market of wholesale or farmer, or CSA or farmers market, correct?
Mm-hmm. Just like having a broader diversity of vegetables versus growing like 3 or 4 crops for the purpose of simplification.
You're saying that you feel like you have to grow a diversity of crops, or?
For CSA purposes, yeah.
Right. Could you skip ahead 1 or 2 slides? Another one, right here. Nope, back to this one, thank you. Let me see if this illustrates the point. Okay, so I'm a big fan of CSAs, and the CSA model works great, and I used to think that it could stand alone and not have to do any of this kind of number crunching. We'd all just go home and farm, right? But then I started thinking about it more. I saw CSAs that were struggling and CSAs that weren't, right? And I realized that, some CSAs are much more profitable than others. And why is that? So I'll give you an example here where I have 2 imaginary CSAs. One is Richard's all corn CSA. And so for that $500 a year, $25 a week for 20 weeks, you're going to get 5 dozen ears of corn week after week after week after week after week, okay? You have to like corn. Or you could be a farm stand, or you could be a restaurant, who knows. But if I had a market for that, that'd be my all corn CSA. On the other side of the profitability continuum, I have my all kale CSA, which is one of my most profitable crops. And here for the $25, you're going to get at $2.50 a bunch, you're going to get 10 bunches of kale week after week after week after week, okay? There might be a kale lover out there, but generally maybe a restaurant would be able to use that. So On this end, with Richard's all corn CSA, I am depending on volunteer labor. I'm working way too hard. I don't have the cash flow to fix the barn roof when it's leaking. I don't have time to go on vacation or money to go on vacation. I'm not paying my employees well or myself well. And I'm not really thinking about the future too much. Here on Richard's all kale CSA, I'm very profitable, and when the barn roof leaks, I fix it. And I'm paying my people twice what anybody else is paying in the neighborhood. And I'm saving for retirement, I'm going on vacation, and I'm having fun doing it. And I even spend money to make my kale operation even more profitable. A vicious cycle of making too much money. It's a terrible thing. So, here, I'm doing really well. There, I'm barely surviving. In your mix of vegetables that you pick, they're going to be this band of products that are going to be somewhere on this continuum of profitability, right? The more things that you grow on the high profitability things are going to be here, and the more things you grow on the low profitability things here. So I would still have a sense of where your profitable items are and try to encourage that. I did the math originally doing all this. Okay, so I used to grow everything all the time, and when I first did it, I put them all in order, no matter how much I grew it, just in terms of how much was profitable or not, with the kale and the basils and parsleys at the top, and corn and peas and beans at the bottom. I just stopped growing a lot of things. And for my CSA, I have a newsletter. It's a great vehicle for communication. I said, after some financial analysis, we realized we're not making any money on these crops, and we decided to stop growing. We encourage you to buy them from our neighboring farmers, but we will offer you salad mix and tomatoes and cucumbers and still like 15, 18 other vegetables. And people were happy. They understood. They still go to the store to buy avocados and coffee, and they're going to go to the store to buy sweet corn from somebody else. So that worked out great, and the same thing as farmers market, we had explained to our customers. But from the outside, our farm looked absolutely no different. When I first did this analysis and dropped these things, Richard and his crew were still running around like mad on his farm, and it looked like a crazy vegetable farm. No one would tell the difference. Only what we were growing. We were increasing the kales and decreasing the corn. And that in itself, in that first year, raised our profitability $10,000, just from nothing else except crop selection, okay? The same market, same everything else. And so if I were to give you a job for 2 days with a pencil and a paper and a calculator and said, I'll pay you $10,000 for 2 days of work, what would you do? You'd say, I'll take it. That'd be a no-brainer, right? I mean, like, to actually say, I want to take charge of my financial destiny and I want to be able to squeeze more money out of my gross sales, you can do it. And you can still do it with the CSA. I will challenge the paradigm of loss leaders, which is the effect of, Mandy, how much time? 5 minutes, okay. The whole thing about losing money, if you're intentionally losing money, you have to really make sure you're growing a lot of kale in order. If I'm trying to sell more kale and I have to sell something at a loss to do it, I better be selling more kale. Why don't I just sell more kale instead of growing something I'm losing money on? So you don't want to, there's a market synergy, I understand. And I was talking at lunch with people about how 1 year after farming for 20 years, my crew chief left after she became pregnant and taking a year off. And so my wife and I said, let's just slow down, we'll throttle down. We gave up a lot of markets, and we just went to farmers market instead of growing 3 tables worth of everything we could. We just brought one thing, and it was tomatoes. We brought 3 tables of tomatoes and nothing else. We sold a lot of tomatoes, and I was kind of surprised. I was shocked, actually, that we sold a lot of tomatoes. People came to us for tomatoes, and they went to everybody else for their salad mix and everything else. So I don't know, if you have a loss leader and you're saying, well, I bring, not that they're a loss leader, I'll just use the example of eggs. But if you're to bring 20 dozen eggs to your farmer's market table to say, well, I get people to come to my stand to buy eggs, then they'll buy my asparagus and other things. And by 9:15, all your eggs are sold out. All you've done is just put a hole in your pocket, draining your money out of your bank account, right? Visually, if I'm on one shore of a lake and I want to go to the other shore of a lake and I'm in a canoe, right? I get in my canoe and I start paddling across. I'm trying to get to where I'm going. In one hand I have a paddle. The other hand I've got a portable drill with a drill bit, and I put a hole in the bottom of the boat, and I do that, and I put another hole in the bottom of the boat. Put another. It seems so simple. Just put both hands on the paddle, you know, and drop the drill, because that's what you're doing. You're kind of sabotaging your own efforts when you consciously lose money. You have to really buoy it up by something else. Synergy is a good thing, and I understand that, you know, it depends. You know, people are attracted to your stand or your CSA for the diversity. For CSAs, I'm a big fan of multi-farm CSAs, where people can specialize in certain things, and 4 of you, and happens in Vermont, get together, and one person grows root crops, another person grows greens, another person grows solanaceae or whatever else, and they all do it very efficiently, and then collectively pool their efforts to market their CSA. And most CSA customers like it because they're still supporting the local farm. They're supporting more local farms, right? If you were to grow things that aren't going to make money, like peas or beans, we did that for a while, and we just did a pick your own. We just planted it and say, if you want it, they're there for you if you want it, but the customer has to pick them. Yes?
Do you track your outstanding invoices on a spreadsheet? Have you found a better way?
Do I track my...
Outstanding invoices?
So do I track my outstanding invoices on a spreadsheet? So what I do is, I didn't bring it, but I have a accordion file, alphabetical order, that if for Eliza, who did not pay me when we made that transaction, it would go under E for Eliza, right? And then I have a paper record of all my accounts receivable right in front of me, right? And if she did pay me, so say she gave me the $60, I would have put the check or the cash, and I would put it in a place in a little holder to go to the bank. Every week I just make a deposit, and that just goes in a place to get held in order for payment. So if it's an accounts receivable, I have all my accounts receivable in a folder that I can look at and just see who owes what. Most people always pay. If Eliza puts that in her jeans and washes it and loses the invoice, I will then make a copy and say, hey, Eliza, I have this record. I have no record of payment on this. Could you check your checkbook? And everybody will say, sure, here you go. And it's signed by her. So she's not going to dispute that. So you want to have a way of having accounts receivable to track to make sure you get your money. That's a huge financial leak. That's a subject of a whole other talk. But financial leaks are very dangerous. Okay, like if I did the same transaction with Eliza, and then I go home and I lose that invoice, that's $60 out of my pocket, right? That's like $60 right out of my wallet, you know, because that's money as good as in the bank. What's that?
QuickBooks Online.
QuickBooks, so QuickBooks is great.
So much on the amount of time I spend on invoicing with $160 a year that I spend is incredibly
So I'm a big fan of Intuit and QuickBooks, and they do a great job. And the reason I still use these paper ones, I have a bigger one, because I'm always hawking stuff off the back of the truck. So I go there, instead of pre-printing the invoice in my home and then having to adjust it, I just bring this, and I'm saying, hey, I'll make a deal on 3 cases of Cukes if you buy all 3. And so then I do that and I add it up. So
in the last couple of years, that app has gotten way more user-friendly.
okay.
So
So you could.
in the field and
Oh, great. I didn't think about that. Yep.
Which there's sometimes, I would say, sometimes paper is still much too much. Sometimes I still scribble it down and put it in later.
Yeah.
But I think as everyone's carrying smartphones around in the field,
It's already there.
a lot more intuitive than
Hey, yeah. Speaking of smartphones, if you're, I don't have any financial interest in it, but I did help develop it. Beat Clock is a phone app for Android and I think Apple now. But basically it's for $8 for life, you get this app that you can then go to the field and you have a scroll down menu of beans or peppers or whatever, and you punch in harvesting and you can track that, and it'll automatically populate a spreadsheet that's on the NOFA, the Excel workbook that NOFA has. And so you can do crop budgets pretty easily from your phone. Okay. Yes?
Quick question. In addition to your book, talk about
Well, I mean, there's a farmer's office. There's, I would say, something like Vern Grubinger's book is really good on sustainable vegetable production. It's really good on the production aspect. And I would probably go to Chris Blanchard's book. You know the title of that? Somebody help me with that. Virgilius Farm Finances, correct. Yeah, anyway, and so that kind of delves into the same farm-friendly, specific topics like that. So my time is up, and I just want to thank you all for coming.